Hey guys, here I am again. This is the introductory lecture for Psychology of Gender. And so when I talk about gender, I'll get into a lot of different things, but first things first, some of your gender is determined, of course, by nature, and some of it's determined by nurture, where you grow up. And so it's a combination of these two things that kind of determine your masculinity or femininity. Of course, testosterone and estrogens have something to do with that, but also there's cultural norms that go along with the genders. Okay, so that leads into this right here, these gender norms. And if you don't follow the norms, I love people that don't follow the norms, then you get a lot of flack from the rest of the tribe. I'm a social psychologist, so I talk a lot about conformity and deviance in my other class, but it has a lot to do with this class because there's definite norms. That's why I like Young Thug, because he wears dresses. Dudes aren't supposed to wear dresses, right? And so he's breaking against the norm. Now, when I talk specifically about gender and how it's been studied over the years, some people have focused a lot on the differences, that men and women are really different. Of course, they're different. Like Freud's like, anatomy is destiny. It's like dudes have a penis, girls have a vagina. They're completely different species almost. But other people have tried to downplay that and say, oh no, let's look at how we're the same. Now, I'll argue both things. Now, some of this top one up here has been called the maximalist view because you're emphasizing the differences between the genders. And on the bottom, it's called the minimalist view because, like, oh, let's just look at similarities because it's not politically correct to say men and women are different. Of course, they're different. Okay, I hope that made sense. Okay, you don't have to remember this, but from my social psychology class, I talk about this guy Barry. And in 1984, when he talked about prejudice and discrimination, and this has to do with kind of gender discrimination, he talked about three kinds of people: separatists, multiculturalists, and assimilators. I usually apply it to the races, like race, like black versus white. But now I'm going to apply it to gender. When I apply it to gender, I mean, we could be separatist of gender, but that would be like all women live over here and all men live over here and they don't have any contact with each other. I mean, that's kind of like convents and like monasteries. I mean, there is a history of that. Or we could be multiculturalist, where we allow men and women to be different and we celebrate those differences, and there's plenty of communication across the two. So that's two of the three that Barry talked about. One of the three was assimilators, and this is the fear, I think, of both multiculturalists and separatists, because if you blend the genders too much, then what's male and what's female anymore? I love androgyny. That's why if I show this right here, this symbol for androgyny, I love this picture. I love when people ride the line right in the middle. But I think a lot of people have this fear that if we assimilate everybody, there'll be no more like butchness, femness, and uniqueness among the genders. Because I like that there's butch and femme, but I also like that middle ground where you kind of can't tell. Now, let me see what I have on here. Oh yeah, this is where I was going to go on a rant about assimilation. This is why it's a bad thing. This is what the dude originally looked like before white people showed up. And when white people got a hold of him, they whited his ass up like this. They assimilated him. We want all people to look the same. Everybody to look the same gender wise, right? Everybody be like kind of gender fluid or whatever. I like gender fluidity. But I don't need everybody whited up just so that we assimilate everybody, because we lose your unique identity over here. And that's kind of the point I'm making. I'm going to try to, translate that into gender and not necessarily race. This next section, I wanted to define two different terms. This is not called the psychology of sex, and I'm not talking about having sex. I'm talking about your biological sex. Are you a girl right here or a boy, right? And sometimes we call this assignment. Can I assign you to either male or female? And we'll get into this later. And how do they assign people? Well, based on things like chromosomes and hormones and your internal and external genitalia. So this is not the psychology of biological sex. It's the psychology of gender. And so what is gender? These are expectations for men and women. Okay, girls are wearing pink and boys are wearing blue. That's an expectation. That's not necessarily having to do with do you have a penis or a vagina. So we're going to go off on this because the expectations vary widely, especially by culture. Okay, so stereotypes. I'm a social psychologist, so stereotypes is one of those things I love talking about. And when I talk about stereotypes, I usually talk about the forest. Why? Because I talk about all the information you could possibly have about a person, place, or thing. It's like a forest of information you could have about them. So all these little eyes on here, and if you've had me before, you know what I'm talking about, are pieces of information in the forest. Now, I have a limited attentional capacity, so I have to focus my attention on a subset of the forest. But I can choose that. I freely choose this. And so this is called selective attention. This has a lot to do with how we process information about people's gender, for instance. Now, if I come back to this right here, here's all the information out there in the forest. And so let's say you have a person over here. Usually I use this for social psychology because I can notice maybe things like their skin color or how they're dressed or their haircut. And then I would start to piece this information together. Hopefully you're with me. Now, pretty soon, as I piece that information together, I kind of put them into this thing, and I haven't talked about schemas in this class, but if you know me, I put them into a folder. Oh, okay, they're this kind of a person. And as soon as I put them into a folder, categorize them, I start to react, and that kind of influences their behavior. This is exactly where I'm fixing to go. I hope you were following me right there. Here's where I wish we were in person because normally on the first day of class, speaking of folders, I make people divide into two groups and then come up with a list of traits they think describe men versus describe women stereotypically. Now, these are just a few from one of the last semesters. It's not even one of the best lists, but here they are. So you can see men muscular, cocky, strong, less emotional. That's not me. You know what I mean? I'm more sensitive, submissive, soft, passive. It's like, am I a girl? That's what my dad calls me. That's why I'm teaching this class. Okay, so this is the thing. I mean, different cultures, have different expectations of how a man acts versus how a girl acts. Throw like a girl, I'll get into that later on. Now, when I talk about these folders, sometimes I hate folders. I don't want a folder. I know we have to check male or female, but, and there are transgender people we'll talk about who are changing folders. But my favorite kind of people are genderqueer people who say, fuck the folder, because I ain't going to tell you if I'm a boy or a girl because that has nothing to do with anything. You know what I mean? And so they don't like to be categorized as male or female because why should you have that at the top of your list? I kind of think this is awesome, and this is the reason I call myself queer. I don't want to call myself gay or straight. Fuck all that. That's the number one thing I'm going to identify myself by. I just don't want to check those boxes. So I understand that's not a popular stance. Now, oh yeah, think about America. There's only two folders. I hate this shit. I don't care who wins the election. I'm not white and really rich. You know what I mean? So they're going to just do whatever they want to for 4 years. And then I'm just going to be stuck in my, same job, even though I love this job, but it's not going to change my life that much. Now, what's the whole moral of the story? If you think about this, there's this first thing I wanted to teach you, the self-fulfilling prophecy. Your beliefs about other people affect the way you treat them. If you think someone's going to be a jerk, sometimes you're a jerk to them first. That's just, I don't know, human nature. Now, because you've acted like a jerk, preemptive strike. You might not even notice yourself doing it. They start kind of acting like a jerk, right? Getting all angry and this, that, and the other. And it's like, see, they're a jerk. And it's like, but you elicited that behavior out of them. So if you go to a party and I tell you this guy, John, you're going to meet is a real asshole, and then you see him at the party and you start noticing, it's like, yeah, he's not really talking and this, that, and the other. It's like, yeah, but maybe you were like cold to him to begin with and you didn't subconsciously notice that. So you elicited that behavior out of him. Okay, enough about that one. But this whole I told you, see, that's the way they are, but you forgot that your category, your stereotype drove the whole thing around. That's called also the confirmation bias. We find what we're looking for. One of the girlfriends I had one time said this: if you're an angry person, Tim, there's going to be an asshole around every corner. Every day you get up. Why? Because you're always going to have an excuse to be angry in traffic, here, somebody at work, whatever it is. And this is the moral of the story I usually try to convey to you if I was in class. If you think you're going to have a shitty life, you're going to have a shitty life. If you think you're going to have a good life, you're going to have a good life because you find what you're looking for. I'm the poster child for the first one, you know what I mean? Because I'm always expecting things to turn out bad, and then they do. Okay, so let's get off of that, but I do have this quote to wrap things up, and here it is. Whatever you hold in your mind will tend to occur in your life. That's your stereotype about yourself. If you continue to believe as you've always believed, what's going to happen? You're going to act as you've always acted. And if you act as you always acted, you're going to get the same results you've always gotten. So the only thing you need to do is change your mind. Tim. Okay, so I hope you like that section. Before we go any further, I wanted to say a few things about your media project, and it relates to all the stuff I just talked about. There's all kinds of information about men and women out there. But in a way, the media pre-filters it and shows us the traits they think men are supposed to be and women are supposed to be. This is what your project is about. Now they show this to us on TV and magazines everywhere else. This is the way girls are supposed to look. This is the way boys are supposed to look. This is how they should act, what they should wear, etc. Now we react based on this and we put people into categories. And then when we put them into categories, we start doing the self-fulfilling prophecy. Now, the media uses all these tactics to perpetuate this, to filter. And so there's 4 tactics. I mentioned this on the using this video thing, or using this course video, I should say. These 4 tactics are right here. So you can go out and get these. You don't need to write this down right now. But for instance, I was mentioning dismemberment before. A woman is often dismembered from her face, her body is, treating her parts, as separate. They're not connected to her mind and emotions. And so what's all that gobbledygook mean? Well, for your project, I want you to go out and get ads. 1 ad for each one of these tactics. And so here's an ad right here for dismemberment. I didn't know I had this on here. I mean, I'm a dude. I love this ad, you know what I mean? But why can't she have a head? I understand they're cropping out, the top part of her boobs, but they don't show her head, right over here, like hanging down on this part, right? And the idea is, well, there's the important parts, that objectifies women and they're sex objects, and we don't care for them for this part. We just care for them for the parts. And so look at this, billboard from Australia. I mean, they were all over Australia. It's like, yeah, but where's her head? And the idea is I'm going to cut her head off because we don't care what her head looks like. You know what I mean? It's kind of crude, but this perpetuates that women are sex objects or, kind of toys and they're ornaments. And, this is kind of damaging for women and it's continuing to be perpetuated through this tactic. So all of the tactics, kind of do this. Now, you don't have to always do it just for women. If you look at Abercrombie and Fitch, they show these real hunky, sexy guys, you know what I mean? It's real erotic, but they don't show their heads. And so it's not that they only do this tactic for women. Now, what do I have on here? Oh, yeah. This is canting. Canting is when you hold your body at weird positions. Like, I don't know if you can see me, but I kind of like bend my wrist like, a fairy. And like, that's not good for men. It's like I hold myself in these weird positions that men are not supposed to do. But here's Giselle. I love her. She's so pretty. But she looks like she's going to be off balance, and that's what it's supposed to convey, canting. That you're not prepared and vigilant like a warrior. Like men stand up straight and they meet the camera like they're a fierce warrior. And so that's one of the tactics. Or right here, dominance and submission, where in advertisements, a lot of times men are looking at you, women are looking away, they're pushed to the corner or below the man, he takes up more physical space, etc. And you can look into that one. And then my favorite is clowning, but I like ditziness. You know what I mean? But the ditziness conveys that women are clowns and the perpetual child that can't really handle anything, so they have to have a man, which is damsel in distress. And knight in shining armor kind of relates to, you know what I mean, that lack of canting I mentioned before. So you can see how all this starts to perpetuate the stereotypes we have about men and women. So if you have any questions, about that, I have this overview out there, right, that you can go and look at on Canvas, but there's a rubric, and here's a little piece of it if I can get that off of there. Like for dismemberment, how'd you do the definition? That's going to be 5 points. And then how'd you do your one example? You get one ad for each one. And then like how you describe the use of that tactic within the ad is the majority of your grade. So you got 4 media tactics, that's 4 times 20, which is 80. And the last 20% is section 5, where you pick one of the 4 and you just kind of bullshit about why you think it's the worst one. So that section 5 should be easy. Everybody should get credit on that, but you can go check out the rubric for more information or give me a call or an email. Okay, so let's circle back around to the confirmation bias, the whole we find what we're looking for. And this also applies not only to the general public, but a lot of times in science, especially way long ago, but even now it's gotten better, but science can be biased. A lot of times scientists find what they're looking for. And so what does that mean? It's like, well, if they expect men or women to be certain ways, even if they're not actively, thinking that, they have these hypotheses about how, oh, men are supposed to be more butch and women are supposed to be more femme. And so they started to find this in early studies. And it's like, yeah, but maybe you're just studying stereotypes. And so this is a quote about the social constructionist, which is the first bias that I'm going to talk about. And here's just the quote. As scientists, we do not discover reality, we invent it. Maybe we're not talking about chemistry here or physics, but science does not lead researchers to map a realistic picture of the world, but to construct views that reflect their personal perceptions and biases, just to confirm their original stereotypes. That's what a hypothesis is in a way. Okay, and so not all science is like this, but social science is very prone to this because when you start studying races or genders or other things, then people are involved and it's very biased. Okay, so scientists, kind of just, confirm pre-existing stereotypes like I just said. Now, Ellen Weinstein in 1968 had this famous paper, Psychology Constructs the Female. And what she was arguing is all psychology has done up to now is just study the stereotypes of females and then just kind of reinforce those. Okay, so we'll get into her later. But there's other biases in gender research as well. And some of these biases I want to go into and then we'll be done for today. Okay, so I call them isms. Okay, so there's a lot of isms out there in our society, and they usually aren't good things. Okay, so one of the isms we have is androcentrism. And you might not have heard this, but andro is kind of the root for male. I didn't know this, but I love Father Andre, Andro, so it kind of is the same thing. And so feminism, you know what that is, but to me, both of them are isms. If you're in the middle, you're unbiased. So either one's favoring females, one's favoring males. So if you're favoring one side or the other, you're still kind of biased, right? kind of like with racism, you know, it kind of goes both ways. So we have grown up in a patriarchal society, and I'm going to go off on this several times throughout the course of this semester. But other societies might have been matriarchal where women were in charge, but we have been traditionally patriarchal, and so we've been more biased to androcentrism, chauvinism, all this stuff that favors men. Okay, I don't want to go off on Ruth Bader Ginsburg right now, but I could. Okay, so egalitarianism is in the middle where you're not biased. Okay, Susan B. Anthony, who's also a really progressive woman for women, says it was we the people, not we the white male citizens, nor yet we the male citizens, but we the whole people that founded this thing. You know, men their rights and nothing more, women their rights and nothing less. That's egalitarianism. Okay, the next bias is called ethnocentrism. It's a mouthful. You have ism right here, ethnic kind of right here. It's like egocentrism, but for your own ethnic group. You know, for me, it'd be like white American, you know what I mean? And speaking of American, it's like we're pretty ethnocentric when it comes to our country. And so here's my ethnocentric map of America. Here we are. We're the best. Nobody lives up here. We get our people to do our laundry and lawns, and coffee comes down here, tier below us. That's so racist, you know. Evildoers and bomb makers go here. Commies, pussies, like zoo animals. I mean, it's really bad. But a lot of Americans see the world this way. We're up here, and everybody else is a little bit lower than us, a tier lower. And so I have this cartoon right here where this lady right here is like, oh my God, look at this poor thing right here. If I can get my pen to work, she doesn't have any clothes on. She's being dominated by men. Look at this poor thing. She has so many clothes on. She's being dominated by men. So Margaret Mead, she was way ahead of her time. This kooky looking lady, she went to New Guinea in the 1930s and then started writing these books based on her experience over there. And what she studied is the roles that men and women were assigned to in different tribes. She lived with the tribes and did all this stuff. And what she found, let me see if I got this on here, is that in the Manu, in this tribe she lived with, only the men enjoyed playing with the babies, not the women. I mean, that's very strange. It's like really neat to know that. Or in the Toda, she found that domestic work was too sacred for the women. Only the men could wash the dishes and do the laundry. And with the Arapesh, both were gentle and nurturing. And the Mundagumor were the opposite. Both are really aggressive and non-nurturing. And then finally, the last one, I hope it doesn't cut off here, but the Chambuli, the women were dominant and personal and in charge, and the men were emotionally dependent and subservient. So you can see, even within one little island area, there were very different roles for men and women. Thus, if I think about me spouting off how girls and boys or men and women are different, I'm really talking about my experience here in America, which is also limited. Now, let me see if I can get off of this. The last two biases have to do with this area. I love sociobiology, but basically what sociobiology does is look at evolution and look at things like herding and flocking and courting rituals and hives and all this stuff and relate it to human behavior. I'm a big sociobiologist. But when I get into this area, humans or animals, one of the biases within sociobiology is heterosexism. Because the end goal is that humans get together to mate and procreate and propagate the species, you know, Charles Darwin style. But then what does that say about gay people or straight people that don't want to have kids, etc.? So there's some ism going on there. The other ism is one of my favorite is anthropomorphism. Talk about a mouthful. Ism. That's like the root for human. And so this is called the skeptical hippo. But he's not really skeptical. A hippo is not being skeptical. But it seems like he looks skeptical to me. Speaking of which, I think I have this little video right here of anthropomorphism, and then we're going to be done for the day.
So she gives a rock to us, that's the task. And we give her a piece of cucumber and she eats it. The other one needs to give a rock to us. And that's what she does. And she gets a grape. And she eats it. The other one sees that. She gives a rock to us now, gets again cucumber. She tests the rock now against the wall. She needs to give it to us. And she gets cucumber again.
So I'm saying in that previous video that that monkey thinks that it's not fair, and that's anthropomorphism. But I believe in that. So why do I have this up here? I want to remind you before I leave today, please go out and look at the Media Tactics Project. Get a start on it. If you have any problems, it's only 5 pages. That's 1 page for each section. Just think of it that way. That doesn't include the pictures, but please contact me if you have any questions about it. Okay, that's like the introduction lecture. The next one will be on research methods. I'll see you next time.